Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. This happened sometime in the early to mid-2000s, before smartphones had become part of everyday life, and long before everyone had GPS directions available in their pocket. It was Valentine's Day, and my girlfriend and I had gone out for dinner at Medieval Times in North Jersey. At the time, it felt like a great idea for a date. We had watched the show, eaten dinner, and enjoyed the whole experience. The night had gone well, and all we needed to do afterward was find our hotel. That should have been the easy part. I had printed directions from MapQuest before we left. For anyone who does not remember that time, MapQuest was how many people traveled before phone navigation became common. You typed in your starting point and destination on a computer, printed several pages of directions, and hoped every road sign matched what was written on the paper. If you missed a turn, there was no calm voice telling you to make a U-turn. The paper did not automatically find a new route. You were simply lost. I also had a general idea of where the hotel was, but I was young and not a very experienced traveler. I did not know New Jersey or the roads around New York City very well. At night, many highways and exits looked the same to me. Still, I was confident when we left Medieval Times. I had the printed directions, and I believed I could follow them. For the first part of the drive, everything seemed fine. My girlfriend and I were talking about the show and enjoying the rest of our Valentine's night. We were tired but in a good mood. Then I missed a turn. At first, I did not think it was a serious problem. I assumed I could take the next exit and find my way back. I looked at the MapQuest pages, but the directions only described the correct route. There was nothing explaining what to do from the road I was now on. I made another turn, hoping it would connect with something familiar. It did not. The roads became more confusing. There were highways crossing above and below each other, ramps joining from different directions, and signs for places I did not recognize. I tried to read everything quickly while also watching traffic. My girlfriend looked at the printed directions and tried to help, but neither of us knew where we were. Every wrong turn seemed to create two more choices. I knew we were somewhere in or around New York City, but I could not have said exactly where. We might have been just outside the city, close to one of the bridges or tunnels, or in a part of New Jersey that only felt like New York because of the highways. All I knew was that I had no idea how to reach the hotel. To make things worse, the fuel gauge was getting low. I had not expected to spend so much time driving around. The trip from the restaurant to the hotel should not have been very long, so I had not worried about getting fuel before we left. Now we were lost at night in an unfamiliar area, and the car was running low. Then I passed through a toll booth. I do not remember which toll it was or what road we were on. I only remember realizing too late that I did not have enough cash with me. This was before electronic toll systems were as simple or common as they are now. If you reached a cash toll without money, it could become a real problem. I needed to find an ATM. I also needed fuel. I decided to take the first exit I saw and look for a gas station. The exit led us away from the main flow of traffic. and into a darker area beneath the highway. Large concrete structures were above us, and the sound of passing cars echoed through the space. It was around 10 o'clock at night. The area was not completely empty, but it felt isolated. The roads were poorly lit, and many nearby businesses appeared closed. Eventually, I saw a gas station. It was located underneath or very close to the highway. At first, I felt relieved. I could get fuel, withdraw some cash, and then ask someone for directions to the hotel. As I drove into the parking lot, however, I realized the gas station was closed. The fuel pumps were shut off. The main office was dark. All the outside lights in the parking lot were off. There was no bright sign, no employee standing behind the counter, and no other customer filling a car. The place looked abandoned for the night. I should probably have left immediately. But then I noticed an ATM near or inside the shop area. Even though the station was closed, the machine appeared to be available. I did not need to stay long. I only had to withdraw enough money for the toll and then continue looking for another gas station. My girlfriend remained in the car while I got out. The parking lot was dark enough to make me uncomfortable. The highway above created deep shadows, and the sound of traffic was loud but strangely distant. Cars were passing nearby, yet the gas station itself felt cut off from everything. The shop office was closed, but I could see a small amount of light coming from somewhere inside. There was a dim lamp in a back room that I could not see directly. The light was weak, but it spread far enough into the office for me to make out part of the interior. I assumed someone had simply left a light on. There were no signs that the business was open. The front area was empty. I stepped up to the ATM and began the transaction. I inserted my card, entered my PIN, and selected the amount of money I wanted to withdraw. Then the machine stopped responding. At first, I waited. Older ATMs could be slow, and I thought it was simply processing the request. The screen remained on, but nothing changed. No cash came out. The machine did not return my card. It did not show an error message. It seemed frozen. I pressed one of the buttons. Nothing happened. I waited another few seconds and tried again. Still nothing. I became more irritated than frightened. We were already lost, low on fuel, and trying to find a hotel. Now the one ATM I had found was refusing to work. I looked back at my girlfriend in the car. She was watching me, probably wondering why a simple cash withdrawal was taking so long. I turned partly away from the machine and called or gestured toward her, explaining that the ATM had frozen. I had probably been standing there for 1 or 2 minutes by that point. Then I turned back toward the machine. That was when I saw the man. He was inside the gas station office, standing behind the window. I had not heard a door open. I had not seen him approach. One moment the office had appeared empty. The next, he was there, staring directly at me. He was standing in the dark part of the room, with only the weak light from the back making him visible. I could not clearly see every detail of his face, but I could see enough to know he was glaring at me. He did not look surprised. He did not wave. He did not ask what I was doing. He only stared. I felt an immediate wave of embarrassment and fear. My first thought was that I had accidentally used an ATM that was not meant to be available after hours. Maybe he was the owner, or an employee who had been working in the back. I did not want him to think I was trying to break into the station, so I gave him a small, awkward wave. It was the kind of nervous, nerdy wave someone gives when they have no idea what else to do. He did not respond. His expression did not change. He stayed behind the window, staring at me from inside the dark office. The situation suddenly felt much worse. It was 10 o'clock at night. The gas station was closed. The parking lot lights were off. The pumps were shut down. My girlfriend was waiting in the car, and this man had appeared silently inside a room that I had believed was empty. I started talking through the glass. I explained that I was only trying to use the ATM. I said the machine had stopped working and that I would leave as soon as the transaction finished. I probably spoke too quickly. The man continued staring. For several seconds, neither of us moved. The ATM was still frozen beside me. I could hear the highway above, but inside the parking lot, everything felt quiet. I had no idea whether the man could hear me clearly through the glass. I pointed toward the ATM and tried to explain again. "I'm just using the machine," I said. "Then I'll be on my way." He still did not answer. I began thinking that he might believe I was speaking another language, or that he could not understand me because of the glass. Then he finally spoke. "I don't speak Spanish." That sentence completely broke something in my mind. I had been speaking English. I had not said a single word in Spanish. There was nothing about the situation that explained his response. Maybe he had misunderstood me. Maybe he was trying to make a joke. Maybe he had heard only part of what I said and assumed I was speaking Spanish because the sound was unclear through the window. But the way he said it did not feel friendly or confused. It felt wrong. He had stood silently in the darkness, staring at me, and then responded to a language I had never used. For some reason, that was the moment my fear became too strong to control. My mind stopped trying to be polite. I stopped worrying about the ATM. I stopped caring whether the transaction would complete. I turned and ran back to the car. I do not remember whether the machine returned my card before I left or whether I managed to cancel the transaction. I only remember that the withdrawal never went through. The cash never came out. I got into the driver's seat and closed the door. My girlfriend asked what had happened. I told her there was a man inside and that we needed to leave. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot as quickly as I could. I checked the mirrors, half expecting the man to come outside. He did not follow us. He remained inside the station, or at least, I never saw him again. Once we were back on the road, I tried to explain the whole encounter. I told my girlfriend that the man had appeared behind the window without warning. I told her about the staring. Then I repeated what he had said. "I don't speak Spanish." She knew I had been speaking English. That made the moment feel even stranger. We tried to laugh about it because we were safe in the car again, but I could not stop thinking about the man's face in the darkness. Maybe he had been working late and thought I was trying to steal something. Maybe he was asleep in the back room and woke up when he heard the ATM. Maybe he was drunk, tired, or confused. There were many normal possibilities. Still, none of them explained why he had watched me silently for so long before speaking, and none explained why he said he did not speak Spanish. I kept replaying the interaction, my nervous wave, his complete lack of response, my explanation that I was using the ATM, the long stare, then that sentence. The more I thought about it, the less it made sense. We continued driving, still low on fuel and without cash. At that point, however, I was more focused on getting away from the gas station than solving either problem. Eventually, we found our way back toward more familiar roads. I cannot remember exactly how we managed it. We may have stopped somewhere else for directions, found a working gas station, or recognized a road from the MapQuest pages. The rest of the drive felt much longer because both of us were tired and ready for the night to improve. At last, we found the hotel. Walking into the lobby felt like entering a completely different world. The hotel was bright, warm, and full of normal sounds. There were employees, lights, and other guests nearby. After being lost beneath dark highways and standing alone at a closed gas station, the ordinary hotel lobby felt incredibly safe. We checked in and went to our room. Thankfully, the rest of our Valentine's night was great. Nothing else frightening happened. Once we had settled down, the gas station story became something we could laugh about. I joked about nearly losing my mind because a man said he did not speak Spanish. My girlfriend made fun of the awkward little wave I had given him. The fear faded enough for us to enjoy the evening, but the memory stayed with me. Even now, I can picture the gas station under the highway. I remember how dark the parking lot was. I remember the useless pumps and the locked office. I remember the dim light coming from a room I could not see. Most of all, I remember turning back toward the ATM and finding the man standing behind the glass. There was something deeply uncomfortable about the fact that I had not noticed him earlier. Had he been there the entire time? Maybe he had been sitting in the back room, watching me on a security camera. Maybe he heard the machine and walked forward. Or maybe he had already been standing in the darkness, hidden beyond the reach of the weak light. If he had been watching from the beginning, why did he wait so long to reveal himself? Why did he not simply tell me the station was closed? Why did he not help with the ATM? I also wondered whether the ATM was safe. The machine had frozen after I entered my PIN and selected a withdrawal. What if it had been damaged or altered? What if someone was using the closed station to steal card information? I never saw any strange charges later, so I do not think anything happened to my account. The transaction failed, and I got away without losing money. Still, standing at a broken ATM in an unlit parking lot was not a smart decision. I had been young, lost, and focused on solving the immediate problem. I saw a machine and assumed it was safe because it was there. I did not stop to think about why the rest of the station was closed while the ATM remained accessible. The entire night reminded me how difficult traveling could be before phone navigation. Today, if I missed a turn, my phone would immediately create a new route. It would show the nearest open gas station. I could pay many tolls electronically or search for another road. I could send my location to someone. Back then, one wrong turn could leave you completely confused. You had paper directions for a route you were no longer following, and no easy way to know where you had ended up. That lack of information pushed me toward the first place that looked useful. I was low on fuel, without toll money, and unsure where I was. The gas station should have felt like help. Instead, it became the strangest part of the night. I have tried many times to understand the man's response. Maybe he heard my voice through thick glass and could not recognize the words. Perhaps he assumed I was speaking Spanish because he could not understand me. Maybe another person had visited earlier and spoken Spanish, and he was still thinking about that conversation. Maybe he was making a sarcastic comment because he believed I was talking nonsense. It could have been nothing more than a misunderstanding, but the timing and the way he looked at me made it feel more threatening. He did not say, "What?" He did not say, "The station is closed." He did not say, "The ATM isn't working." He stared at me for several long seconds and then said, "I don't speak Spanish." The sentence was so disconnected from reality that I no longer knew how to respond. Sometimes confusion is more frightening than a clear threat. If he had shouted at me to leave, I would have understood. If he had explained that the station was closed, I would have apologized and gone. Instead, his words made me feel like I had misunderstood the entire situation. For one moment, I wondered whether I had somehow been speaking differently without realizing it. That thought was impossible, but fear does strange things to the mind. I left before anything else could happen. Looking back, running was probably the safest choice. I did not need the cash badly enough to remain there. I did not need to prove that I had a right to use the ATM. I did not need to wait for an explanation. The parking lot was dark, the business was closed, and the man's behavior made me uncomfortable. That was enough reason to leave. The story is not the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to anyone. Nobody chased us. The man never came outside. He did not threaten me or show a weapon. The ATM simply failed, and we drove away. but the experiences stayed with me because of how strange and isolated it felt. My girlfriend and I had started the night enjoying a Valentine's dinner. A few wrong turns later, we were lost somewhere near New York City, low on fuel, without toll money, and parked beneath a highway at a closed gas station. Then, a man appeared silently in a dark office and stared at me. I gave him a small wave. I explained myself in English, and he told me he did not speak Spanish. Maybe there was a perfectly normal explanation. I never stayed long enough to hear it. I was 12 years old when this happened, and I am 13 now. Even though it has not been very long, the whole experience still feels like something I should never have had to live through. No child should have to watch their family fall apart, see animals suffer, or feel afraid inside the place where they are supposed to be safe. My mother, my older brother, and I went to Florida with my stepfather. At the time, I did not fully understand how bad things were going to become. I knew he could be angry and difficult, but I did not know how cruel he could really be. The place we moved into was a rundown trailer park. It did not feel safe or clean. There were people around who seemed to be using drugs, and many of the trailers looked damaged or badly cared for. The roads and yards were dirty, and the whole area made me uncomfortable. Our trailer was in terrible condition. There were roaches everywhere. We would see them moving across the floor, along the walls, and near the kitchen. It felt like no matter how much we tried to clean, they always came back. There were also rats. They were huge, or at least they looked huge to me at 12 years old. Some of them had extremely long tails, and they got into our food. We would leave bread in the kitchen and later find that the rats had eaten through it. We had to worry about what food was still safe and what had been touched by animals. It did not feel like a real home. It felt like we were trying to survive in a place that was falling apart. We also had 3 dogs with us. Their names were King, Nika, and Prince. They were part of our family. They depended on us for food, water, and protection. They could not understand why things were becoming worse. They only knew that we were the people who were supposed to care for them. At first, I hoped things would improve. I thought maybe we would clean the trailer, get rid of the rats and roaches, and make the place feel more normal. Instead, my stepfather's behavior became worse. One day, my mother accused him of cheating on her. I do not know every detail of the argument, but I remember that he became extremely angry. The fight became serious very quickly. He put his hands around my mother's neck and began choking her. Watching that happen was terrifying. An argument is one thing. Seeing someone place their hands around another person's throat is completely different. It becomes clear that the person is not only angry, they are willing to seriously hurt someone. My mother fought back and managed to get him off her. Once she escaped his grip, he ran out. For a moment, it seemed like the immediate danger had passed, but the family was already breaking apart. Everything became confusing after that. My older brother wanted a Sprite, and my mother drove somewhere to get one. She was arrested because of an out-of-date sticker or registration issue on the car she was driving. I was young, and I did not understand all the legal details. I only understood that my mother was suddenly gone. That left my brother, me, my stepfather, and our 3 dogs. Without my mother there, the situation became even more frightening. My stepfather began abusing my brother. Some of the abuse was not always physical. He ignored him, refused to care for him properly, and kept food from him. My brother was treated as if his needs did not matter. He was being starved and neglected. My stepfather also abused the dogs. King, Nika, and Prince could not escape or ask anyone for help. They were trapped with someone who did not care whether they were hungry, thirsty, afraid, or in pain. I saw the way he treated them, and I knew it was wrong. The dogs began suffering because they were not getting the care they needed. They were not given enough food, and later they were locked away without water. My brother eventually managed to escape. He went to our biological father. I was glad he got away, but that also meant I was left behind for a short time. I knew someone would hopefully come for me, but I did not know exactly when. Those days felt much longer because I was scared and did not know what my stepfather might do next. While I was still there, he forced me to carry marijuana. He wanted to hide it from the police. I was only 12 years old, but he used me to help protect himself. I did not want to carry it. I did not want to be involved with drugs or the police. I was a child, and I should never have been placed in that position. He made me responsible for something illegal because he thought the police might not suspect a child. That made me afraid of getting in trouble for something I did not choose to do. I remember thinking that adults were supposed to protect children from danger. Instead, he was using me to protect himself from the consequences of his own actions. During this time, the dogs were also getting worse. My stepfather locked them away. He did not give them enough food. He did not give them water. One of the dogs had a disease that was apparently common in trailer parks. I do not know the exact name of it, but the illness eventually became worse. Without proper food, clean water, treatment, or care, the dogs had almost no chance of recovering. I could see that they needed help. I wanted to help them, but I was a child trapped in the same situation. I did not have money, transportation, or authority. I could not take them to a veterinarian. I could not force my stepfather to feed them. All I could do was watch and hope that someone would rescue us. A few days after my brother escaped, I was rescued too. I do not remember every detail of how it happened, but I remember the relief of knowing I was finally getting away. I was no longer going to be alone with my stepfather. I would not have to carry drugs for him again. I would not have to wonder what he would do when he became angry. Leaving should have felt like the end of the nightmare, but it was not. We still had our belongings at the trailer. We also still had the dogs there. Later, we went back to collect our clothes and other things. When we arrived, King, Nika, and Prince were still alive. Seeing them alive gave me hope. I thought that meant we would be able to save them. They had survived everything up to that point. They were hungry and neglected, but they were still breathing. I believed someone would take them away from my stepfather and get them help. For some reason, we were not able to take them with us. I was young, so I did not understand all the reasons or rules involved. I only knew that we were leaving again while the dogs remained behind. That was one of the hardest parts. They were our dogs. They trusted us. They probably thought we had come back to rescue them. Instead, we had to leave them in the same place. I do not blame my mother or grandmother for what happened. They tried to get help. My grandmother reported the abuse to animal services. She told them the dogs were being starved and neglected. She told them they needed someone to step in. But animal services did nothing. They did not rescue the dogs in time. They did not remove them from the trailer. They did not stop my stepfather from continuing to neglect them. Because no one helped, 2 of the dogs died. Nika died. King died. Knowing that they died because they were denied food, water, and proper care still hurts. Their deaths were preventable. They were not old animals dying naturally after a peaceful life. They were trapped with someone who refused to take care of them, even after authorities were warned. They depended on people, and the system failed them. Prince survived longer. I do not know exactly what happened to him after that. My stepfather still had him, and because of the way he treated the other dogs, I did not believe Prince was safe. By now, Prince may also be dead. I hope that somehow he escaped, was rescued, or found someone who treated him kindly. I want to believe that, but I do not know. Not knowing is painful because my mind keeps imagining what may have happened. After we escaped, my stepfather continued causing problems. At one point, he harassed my mother from across the street while she was on her way to work. He was arrested for that. For a brief moment, I thought he would finally have to face serious consequences. Then his brother bailed him out. He was released again. As far as I know, he was never properly charged or punished for the domestic violence against my mother. He was not punished for choking her. He was not punished for starving and abusing my brother. He was not punished for forcing me to carry marijuana. He was not punished for abusing King, Nika, and Prince. 2 dogs died, and he still walked free. That is difficult for me to understand. When you are a child, adults often tell you that if someone does something bad, the police or another authority will stop them. They tell you to report abuse. They tell you to ask for help. But in my situation, people were told what was happening, and the help did not come quickly enough. My grandmother contacted animal services, but the dogs were not saved. My mother had been choked, but my stepfather was still free. My brother and I were abused and neglected, but it felt like no one held him responsible for everything he did. I know there may be legal details I did not understand because I was young. There may have been rules, evidence requirements, or decisions that adults did not explain to me. But from my point of view, he hurt people and animals and then continued living his life. Meanwhile, the rest of us were left with the memories. My mother had to remember being choked by someone she had trusted. My brother had to remember being ignored, starved, and abused. I had to remember being forced to carry drugs and watching the animals suffer. King and Nika lost their lives. Prince's fate is still unknown to me. The trailer park itself remains in my memory. I remember the roaches. I remember the rats getting into our bread. I remember the dirt, the fear, and the feeling that the place was not safe. Sometimes a smell or a sound brings back parts of it. Seeing a roach can make me think about that trailer. Seeing a dog locked outside without water makes me angry and afraid. Hearing adults argue can make me remember the moment my stepfather attacked my mother. The memories do not always appear in order. Sometimes they come as small images. My mother fighting to get his hands off her throat. My brother leaving to find safety with our father. The dogs locked away. Being told to carry marijuana. Going back and seeing the dogs still alive. Then learning later that 2 of them had died. I often wonder whether I could have done more. I know I was only 12, but guilt does not always listen to logic. Part of me wonders if I could have secretly given the dogs more water. Could I have opened the place where they were locked? Could I have told another adult sooner? Could I have refused to leave without them? But I also know that I was a child in a dangerous situation. My stepfather had already choked my mother. He had abused my brother. He controlled the house. If I had openly challenged him, he could have hurt me too. Children are not supposed to be responsible for stopping violent adults. Adults and authorities are supposed to protect children and animals from people like him. I try to remind myself of that. King and Nika did not die because I failed them. They died because my stepfather abused them and because the people with the power to rescue them did not act in time. I still feel sad when I think about them. They had names, personalities, and lives. They were not just 3 dogs. King was King, Nika was Nika, Prince was Prince. They were members of our family, and they deserved food, water, shelter, and kindness. They deserved to feel safe. Instead, they were punished for being trapped with a cruel person. What happened also changed the way I think about domestic violence. Before this, I may have thought abuse always happened in a clear and simple way. I thought someone hurt another person, the police came, and the dangerous person was removed. Real life was not that simple. The abuse affected everything. It affected where we lived. It affected whether we had food. It affected the dogs. It affected my mother's freedom. It affected my brother's safety. It affected the things I was forced to do. Even after we left, it continued through harassment and fear. Escaping the trailer did not immediately erase the danger. My stepfather knew where my mother worked. He could still appear and bother her. His brother could still bail him out. We still had to think about whether he might return. That kind of fear stays inside you. At 12 years old, I should have been thinking about school, friends, games, and ordinary problems. I should not have been worrying about whether my mother would survive an attack. I should not have been watching my brother go hungry. I should not have been carrying drugs for an adult. I should not have been wondering whether 3 dogs would die because they had no food or water. No child should experience that. I am 13 now, and I am still trying to understand everything. People sometimes think children forget traumatic events because they are young. That is not always true. Sometimes being young makes the memories more confusing because you do not understand why the adults around you are behaving that way. You only understand the fear. You know something is wrong, but you do not have the power or words to fix it. I am grateful that my brother escaped. I am grateful that I was rescued a few days later. I am grateful that my mother survived being choked. Things could have ended much worse for all of us. My stepfather's actions showed that he was willing to hurt people and animals who depended on him. I do not know how far he might have gone if we had stayed longer. That thought frightens me. Maybe my brother would have become weaker from not eating. Maybe I would have been forced to carry more drugs. Maybe my mother would have returned and been attacked again. Maybe all 3 dogs would have died while we were still there. We escaped before all of that could happen. But we did not escape without losing something. We lost our sense of safety. We lost King and Nika. We may have lost Prince too. We lost the belief that reporting cruelty always means someone will immediately come and stop it. My stepfather was arrested later for harassing my mother, but he was bailed out. As far as I know, he never faced the punishment he deserved for the violence and abuse. He walks free. That makes me angry. It feels unfair that the victims continue carrying the trauma while the person responsible continues with his life. I hope that one day he is held accountable. I hope that no other child, partner, or animal is ever placed in his care. I hope that Prince somehow found safety. Most of all, I hope that telling this story helps people understand why abuse should never be ignored. When someone says an animal is being starved, authorities need to act. When a child says an adult is forcing them to carry drugs, someone needs to protect that child. When a person is choked by a partner, that should be treated as serious violence. Waiting can cost lives. In our case, it cost King and Nika theirs. I still think about the moment we went back for our belongings and saw the dogs alive. If someone had acted then, they might have survived. That memory is painful because it was the last time there was still a chance. They were alive. They were waiting. Then we left, believing or hoping that animal services would do something. They did not. I do not want people to remember this only as a story about a terrible trailer park. The roaches and rats were disgusting, but they were not the real horror. The real horror was living with someone who could choke my mother, starve my brother, abuse our dogs, and use a child to hide drugs. The real horror was asking for help and seeing how slowly it came. The real horror was learning that sometimes a cruel person can hurt an entire family and still avoid serious punishment. I was 12 when it happened. I am only 13 now. I know it will take time before I stop feeling afraid or angry when I remember it. Some parts may stay with me forever. But I also know that my stepfather did not destroy all of us. My mother survived. My brother escaped. I was rescued. We are still here to tell what he did. King and Nika did not get that chance, so I will remember them. I will remember Prince, too, even though I do not know what happened to him. They deserved better than what they received. All of us did. This happened when I was in college and living with a roommate. At the time, both of us were studying engineering, which meant we were almost always busy. We had lectures, labs, projects, exams, and more homework than either of us knew how to finish. Most nights, our apartment looked less like a home and more like a place where two exhausted students happened to sleep. Books were spread across the table, papers were stacked on the floor, and there were usually half-empty cups of coffee sitting somewhere nearby. We spent hours working on problems that made less sense the longer we looked at them. My roommate and I were good friends, but we did not know every detail about each other's families. We talked about our parents occasionally, but we were usually more concerned with passing our classes than discussing our childhoods. That was why I was surprised when his father began calling him repeatedly and talking about his sister. Until that point, I did not even know my roommate had a sister. The calls started as an annoying distraction. My roommate's phone would ring while we were trying to study. He would look at the screen, see his father's name, and either answer with a tired expression or let it ring until it stopped. Then the phone would ring again. His father kept insisting that my roommate needed to go and find his sister. At first, I thought there must have been some family disagreement. Maybe the sister had left home after an argument. Maybe nobody had heard from her for a few days, and the father was worried. But then I heard where she had supposedly gone. Indonesia. According to his father, my roommate's sister had disappeared somewhere in Indonesia, and he believed his son needed to leave college, travel across the world, and find her. The request was so unrealistic that I did not know whether to laugh or become concerned. We were engineering students with almost no free time and very little money. My roommate could not simply leave school, buy a plane ticket, fly to Indonesia, and begin searching for a missing person in a country thousands of miles away. He did not have the resources, information, or experience to do anything like that. Still, his father kept calling. Every conversation seemed to follow the same pattern. His father would demand that he go find his sister. My roommate would explain that he was in school and could not travel to Indonesia. His father would become angry or emotional. Then the call would end. A short time later, he would call again. The calls became so frequent that they started interrupting everything. We would be working on an assignment and the phone would ring. We would be eating and the phone would ring. My roommate would try to sleep and his father would call again. I could see that the situation was frustrating him, but there was also something uncomfortable underneath the frustration. His father did not sound like someone making a reasonable request. He sounded obsessed with the idea that his son had to leave everything behind and search for his sister. I asked my roommate about her. He did not say much. I got the impression that his family situation was complicated and that he did not want to discuss it in detail. I also understood why. College was already stressful enough without having to explain every strange thing a parent was doing. Eventually, after hearing the phone ring again and again, I decided to be stupid and playful. The phone started ringing while we were working, and I told my roommate to let me answer it. I thought it would be funny. I was feeling cheeky, and I wanted to see how long I could speak to his father before the man realized I was not his son. My roommate hesitated, but after being bothered by so many calls, he finally agreed. He handed me the phone. I answered in a casual voice and began talking. His father started speaking immediately, apparently assuming I was his son. He launched into the same subject without taking much time to listen to my voice. He wanted to know what was being done about the sister. He wanted his son to leave school. He wanted him to go to Indonesia and find her. I responded with questions, pretending I was seriously trying to understand the plan. How exactly was his son supposed to leave college? Who was going to pay for the flight? Where in Indonesia was he supposed to search? What information did they actually have? The father continued speaking, still not realizing that someone else had answered the phone. That alone was strange. I did not sound exactly like my roommate. We were both young men, but our voices were different. Either his father was too angry to notice, or he was so focused on his own words that he was not listening carefully. After a while, something in my voice or the way I asked questions finally made him suspicious. He stopped and asked whether he was actually speaking to his son or to one of his son's gay little friends. The insult was meant to embarrass or offend me. What he did not know was that there was more truth in his guess than he realized. I almost laughed, but the conversation was already becoming too strange. Once he knew I was not his son, his attitude changed. He became defensive and aggressive, as if I had personally challenged his authority. I continued asking him how my roommate was expected to solve the situation. He answered by telling me about himself. He said he had traveled around the world. He told me he had spent 3 years in seminary school. He demanded to know what I understood about life or the world. The conversation moved away from the practical question of finding his daughter and turned into a long speech about his experience, intelligence, and authority. He spoke as though his travels and religious education proved that his demand made sense. According to him, I was only a college student who knew nothing. He had seen the world. He had studied religion. He understood things I could not understand. And his son needed to go find his sister. That point remained at the center of everything. No matter what I asked, the conversation returned to the same demand. His son had to leave college and go to Indonesia. He said it with such certainty that it almost felt like he was trying to send my roommate as far away as possible. At the time, that thought did not occur to me clearly. I only thought the man was irrational. I did not know enough about the family to understand what might actually be happening. Eventually, the father became tired of arguing with me and hung up. My roommate and I talked about how bizarre the call had been. I repeated some of the things his father had said, including the comment about his gay little friends. We laughed because the entire conversation had seemed ridiculous. There was something dark about it, but we did not understand how dark. To us, his father was simply an unstable man who had called too many times and made an impossible demand. His daughter was supposedly missing in another country. His son was supposed to abandon school and rescue her. Nothing about it made sense. After that, life returned to normal for a while. We continued attending classes, completing assignments, and trying to survive engineering school. The phone calls may have slowed down or simply became less memorable. Months passed. The strange conversation faded into the background. Then we heard what had happened to my roommate's father. He had apparently gambled the last of his money on the Super Bowl. I do not know exactly how much he had, but it was money he could not afford to lose. He lost the bet. Because of that, he could no longer keep his trailer. The trailer was repossessed. That alone would have been a sad but not unbelievable ending to the story of an unstable man making bad decisions. Then the people repossessing or searching the trailer found something in the freezer. They found my roommate's sister. Her body had been hidden inside it. I heard that she may have been cut into pieces, although I was never completely certain about that detail. Different versions of the story circulated, and I did not want to ask my roommate for more information than he was willing to give. The one fact that seemed clear was terrible enough. His sister had not disappeared in Indonesia. She had been dead inside her father's trailer. The same man who had repeatedly called my roommate and demanded that he travel across the world to find her had apparently known exactly where she was. She was in his freezer. The moment I learned that, I thought about the phone call. I remembered holding the phone and speaking directly to his father. I remembered asking how his son was supposed to go to Indonesia. I remembered the man becoming angry and telling me how much he knew about the world. I remembered him saying his son had to find his sister. At the time, I had believed I was speaking to a difficult and irrational parent. In reality, I had been speaking to the man who had allegedly killed the woman we were discussing. He had been trying to convince his son that she had disappeared overseas while her body was hidden only a short distance away. That realization changed the entire memory. Every sentence sounded different when I replayed it. Why had he chosen Indonesia? Was it completely invented? Had the sister ever spoken about traveling there? Was he trying to create a believable story, or had he simply selected a place far enough away that nobody could easily check? Indonesia was not somewhere my roommate could search casually. It was on the other side of the world. Even if he somehow found the money and time to go, where would he begin? The country is enormous, with thousands of islands and millions of people. Telling someone to search there without a specific address was almost the same as telling them to disappear. Maybe that was the point. Perhaps the father wanted my roommate far away when the body was discovered. Maybe he hoped his son would waste time and money following a false story. Maybe he only wanted to make himself appear like a worried parent. He could continue calling and demanding action, then later say he had tried everything possible to find his daughter. He could point to his repeated phone calls as proof that he was concerned. He was creating the image of a desperate father. All the while, the truth was sitting inside his own trailer. I also began wondering why he kept calling so often. Was he panicking? Was he trying to convince himself of the lie? Did he believe that if he repeated the story enough times, everyone would accept it? Maybe he wanted my roommate to confirm the story to other relatives. If his son said that his sister was missing in Indonesia, people might stop asking questions closer to home. The calls may not have been random at all. They may have been part of an attempt to control the story. That possibility made me feel sick. I had joked during the conversation. I had treated him like an annoying old man. I had asked questions in a playful way because I thought the entire situation was foolish. I did not understand that a dead woman might have been only a few rooms away from him while we spoke. I began picturing the trailer. Where had he been standing during the call? Was he inside it? Was the freezer nearby? Could he see it while he talked to me? Had he just walked past it? The thought that the body may have been in the same building made the memory almost impossible to process. His voice had not sounded like the voice of someone confessing. He had sounded angry, proud, and certain that he was right. That may be the most frightening part. We expect murderers to sound different. We imagine they will be cold, nervous, or obviously dangerous. But over the phone, he sounded like an unpleasant father arguing with college students. There was nothing in his voice that revealed what he had done. He spoke about traveling in seminary school. He insulted me. He complained about his son. He talked like an ordinary difficult person. If the trailer had never been repossessed, I do not know when the body would have been found. The discovery happened because he gambled away his last money and lost his home. It was not careful police work that first exposed the crime, at least from what I understood. It was his own terrible decision. He placed a bet. He lost. The trailer was taken. Someone opened the freezer. That chain of events led to the truth. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if he had won the bet. Would he have kept the trailer? Would the body have remained hidden? How long could he have continued telling people that his daughter was overseas? Eventually, someone may have investigated properly, but there is no way to know. He may have believed he had created the perfect explanation. His daughter had gone far away. She had disappeared in another country. Her brother was responsible for finding her. The father could act concerned while sending everyone's attention toward Indonesia. Then, one foolish gamble destroyed the entire lie. I never asked my roommate to describe exactly how he felt when he learned the truth. There are some questions that feel too cruel to ask. This was his sister and his father. He had not only discovered that his sister was dead, he also had to face the possibility that his own father had killed her and then tried to involve him in covering the disappearance. The repeated phone calls must have become unbearable memories for him. Every time his father demanded that he go search, the man may already have known she could never be found alive. My roommate had probably felt guilty for ignoring the calls. He may have wondered whether he was failing his sister by staying at school. His father used that guilt against him. Then the truth showed that there had been nothing he could do. She had never been waiting to be rescued in Indonesia. I also thought about my own involvement. I had answered the phone as a joke. I had spoken directly to a suspected murderer about his victim before anyone knew she had been murdered. That sentence still sounds unreal when I say it. At the time, I did not feel unsafe. The man was far away and speaking through a phone. I challenged him and asked questions because I believed there were no consequences. Had he known who I was or where we lived? Probably he knew where his son attended school. He may have known the address. That thought came later. During the conversation, I had made fun of his plan and challenged his authority. He had already reacted badly to realizing I was not his son. If he was capable of killing his own daughter, what else was he capable of doing? I do not know whether I was ever in real danger, but I am grateful he never came to our apartment. The story also changed the way I think about strange behavior. Before this happened, I assumed that when someone told a ridiculous lie, it was usually because they were confused, dishonest, or trying to avoid responsibility for something small. I did not consider that a wild story could be hiding something much worse. The claim about Indonesia seemed too foolish to be part of a serious plan. That may have made it effective. People do not always investigate nonsense immediately. Sometimes they dismiss the person telling it. That was what we did. We decided the father was unstable and stopped taking him seriously. Meanwhile, the lie directed attention away from his home. I still remember parts of his voice. I remember the confidence he had when speaking about his experiences. He had traveled the world. He had attended seminary school. What did I know about anything? He presented himself as wiser than us, almost as though his education and travel made him morally superior. Years later, that part feels especially disturbing. A person can study religion without becoming good. A person can travel widely without understanding other people. A person can speak with authority while hiding something unforgivable. He wanted me to feel small because I was young. He wanted to control the conversation. Whenever I returned to practical questions, he talked about himself instead. Maybe he did not have answers. Maybe the entire story was too weak to survive basic questioning. Where exactly in Indonesia was she? Why did he believe she was there? Why was her college-aged brother responsible for finding her? Why had the police not been involved? He could not answer those questions honestly because the truth was inside his freezer. I do not know every detail of the investigation that followed. I do not know exactly when the sister died, how she died, or what evidence connected the father to the crime. The story reached me through my roommate and the information surrounding the discovery. Some details, such as whether her body was in pieces, were never completely clear to me. I do not want to pretend I know more than I do, but the central fact remains. The missing sister was found dead inside her father's freezer. Her father had been calling her brother and insisting that she was missing in Indonesia. I had personally spoken to him about it. That is enough to make the memory stay with me. The event did not feel frightening when it happened. It felt annoying and strange. The horror came months later when we learned what had been behind the conversation. That delay made it worse. Nothing about the phone call could be changed. We could only replay it with new knowledge. Every joke became uncomfortable. Every angry statement from the father sounded like part of a performance. Every demand that his son find his sister became evidence of how completely he had been lying. Sometimes the most disturbing moments do not reveal themselves immediately. You can speak to someone, laugh about the conversation, and continue with your life. Then, months later, one piece of information changes everything. The man on the phone was not a desperate father searching for his missing daughter. He allegedly knew exactly where she was. He was the reason she was missing. And while he demanded that his son cross the world to find her, her body was hidden in his home. Before the next witness tells their story, take a moment to subscribe to Nachtmayer Witness. This channel is for the late hours, when sleep is close, but the mind is still awake enough to notice every sound in the room. New true stories arrive here for anyone drawn to strange encounters, uneasy memories, and nights that never felt normal again. Leave a like if the stories have pulled you in so far. Now, let's return to the darkness. We all make bad decisions sometimes. Most of them only leave us embarrassed or annoyed with ourselves. This one could have ended much worse. When I think back on it now, I know I was not just careless. I was very stupid. I had arranged to meet a man from Tinder. We had been talking for at least a few weeks, and because we had messaged so often, I had started to feel like I knew him. He seemed normal enough in our conversations. He was friendly, asked questions about me, and never said anything that seemed especially worrying. That did not mean I really knew him. I knew what he had chosen to tell me. I knew the photographs he had uploaded and the version of himself he had shown through text messages. I did not know how he behaved when he was angry, disappointed, or alone with someone who could not easily leave. I understood the normal safety rules about online dating. I knew people usually met for the first time in a public place. I knew I should tell someone where I was going, arrange my own transport, and avoid allowing a stranger to learn exactly where I lived. Despite knowing all of that, I agreed to let him pick me up outside my home. I had strong anxiety about driving at the time. Even the thought of driving through busy streets made me nervous, especially when I did not know the route. Instead of facing that fear or taking a taxi to the restaurant, I chose what seemed like the easier option. I gave a stranger from a dating app my address. He would pick me up, drive us to dinner, and bring me back afterward. At the time, I told myself it was fine because we had been talking for weeks. He did not feel like a complete stranger anymore. Looking back, that thought scares me. Talking to someone online for several weeks does not prove they are safe. It only gives them time to learn what makes you comfortable. On the day of the date, I got ready and waited outside my place. I remember feeling nervous, but it was the ordinary kind of nervousness people often feel before meeting someone for the first time. I worried about whether the conversation would be awkward, whether he would look like his photographs, and whether we would have anything to talk about in person. When he arrived, he seemed normal. He pulled up in his car, and I got inside. That was the moment I gave up control of where I was going. The thought did not fully enter my mind then. I only fastened my seatbelt and tried to relax. He told me he wanted to take us out for sushi. I love sushi, so I was pleased. It sounded like a thoughtful choice and made me feel more excited about the date. He entered the restaurant's name into his GPS, and we began driving. For a while, everything went well. We talked about ordinary things. The conversation was pleasant, and he seemed comfortable. I began to think I had worried for no reason. I watched buildings pass outside the window. There were homes, shops, intersections, and other cars around us. I did not know the exact location of the restaurant, so I trusted the GPS and assumed he knew where we were going. Then the surroundings began to change. There were fewer buildings. The streets became quieter. The houses grew farther apart. Eventually, when I looked through the window again, I saw trees. Not a small line of trees beside a normal road. We were entering an area that looked like woodland. The road became darker, narrower, and more isolated. I looked around, trying to understand where we were. We were supposed to be going into town. Restaurants, especially sushi restaurants, were usually near shops, traffic, and other businesses. We should have been moving toward a busy area. Instead, we were driving deeper into what looked like the middle of nowhere. The fear came quickly. One moment, I was confused. The next, my entire body understood that I could be in danger. I looked at him. He noticed the change in my expression almost immediately. "I swear the GPS is taking me through here," he said. I didn't choose this path. His explanation did not make me feel better. Maybe he was telling the truth. GPS systems sometimes choose strange routes, especially if they are trying to avoid traffic or save a few minutes. But that was also exactly what someone with bad intentions might say. I did not know him well enough to tell the difference. "Please just get us back to civilization," I said. I could hear the fear in my own voice. My eyes must have been wide because he looked at me with an uncomfortable expression. He seemed worried too, although I could not tell whether he was worried because we were lost or because he could see that I no longer trusted him. I looked through the window again. There were only trees, empty land, and the road ahead. I began attacking myself inside my mind. Why had I let him pick me up? Why had I given him my address? Why had I not met him at a cafe or restaurant? I had allowed my anxiety about driving to push me into a far more dangerous situation. I could have taken a taxi. I could have asked a friend to drive me. I could have canceled the date. Instead, I was in a stranger's car, in an isolated area, with no idea where I was. I thought, I am going to be murdered in these woods. The thought did not feel dramatic in that moment. It felt possible. I tried checking my phone so I could see our location or help find another route. That was when he said the words that frightened me even more. "There's no signal out here." I looked at my phone. He was right. There was no signal. I could not call anyone. I could not send my location. I could not request an Uber or search for the nearest business. If he turned off the road or stopped the car, nobody would know where I was. I reminded myself to stay calm. I did not want him to know how strongly I suspected him. If he had planned something, showing panic might make him act sooner. I tried to keep my face neutral, though I could feel my body reacting. The tips of my fingers became cold. At the same time, I was sweating. My heart was beating hard, and my mouth felt dry. I tried breathing slowly, but every breath felt shallow. I began looking for anything that could help me. I checked the door handle with my eyes. I wondered if the doors were locked. I looked at the speed of the car and thought about whether I could safely jump out if he slowed down. I checked the side of the road for houses, parked cars, or people. There was nothing. I wondered whether I had anything in my bag that could be used as a weapon. I thought about opening my messages and typing something, even without signal, so it might send later if the connection returned. I tried to remember the last road sign I had seen. My thoughts moved in every direction at once. Part of me wanted to scream at him to turn around. Another part warned me not to make him angry. The anticipation became so unbearable that a strange thought entered my head. If he was going to kill me, part of me wanted him to do it quickly. I did not truly want to die. I was simply terrified of waiting for the moment when he might reveal what he intended. He kept driving. His forehead was beginning to perspire. "I swear I'm not doing this," he said again. "I'm trying to get us back en route to the sushi place." The more he defended himself, the more frightened I became. I had not accused him directly. I had only asked him to get us back to a populated area. Yet he kept insisting that he was innocent. Maybe he was trying to calm me. Maybe he was genuinely embarrassed that the GPs had taken us the wrong way. But a darker part of my mind wondered why he needed to repeat it so many times. "I don't care about sushi anymore," I said. "Get us to a gas station. Anywhere with people at this point." I did not care if the date ended before it began. I did not care how rude I sounded. I wanted cameras, lights, employees, and witnesses. I wanted to stand somewhere surrounded by strangers. He continued checking the GPs and driving. Then he said something that made the situation even more disturbing. "I don't have a shovel or a weapon in my trunk or anything, if that's what you're thinking." I stared at him. That was almost exactly what I was thinking, but hearing him say it made the image more real. I pictured the trunk. I pictured a shovel. I pictured weapons hidden beneath a blanket. Normal people trying to calm someone usually say, "I'm sorry, we're lost, but I'll get us out." They do not normally mention that there is no murder equipment in the trunk. His comment did nothing to calm me. It made me wonder why those exact objects had entered his mind. I forced myself not to react too strongly. I said nothing for a moment and looked back at the road. I kept searching for signs of civilization. Eventually, the trees began to thin. We reached larger roads. Then came streetlights, buildings, traffic, and other cars. The relief was so strong that I almost felt dizzy. I had never been so happy to see ordinary traffic. When we finally arrived at the sushi restaurant, I wanted to get out of the car as quickly as possible. My legs felt weak when I stood. I was physically trembling. The restaurant was warm, bright, and full of people. Servers moved between tables. Customers talked and ate. Plates and glasses made normal sounds around us. After the silence and isolation of the woods, the restaurant felt like the safest place on earth. I considered ending the date immediately. I could have said I was sick, called an Uber, and left. Instead, I made another bad choice. I told myself that he had not harmed me when he had the opportunity. If he had truly planned to murder me, he could have stopped in the woods. He could have turned onto a dirt road or refused to return to town. He had continued driving and eventually brought me to the restaurant. So maybe the GP's route had really been an innocent mistake. Maybe I had panicked because of my own fear. I did not want to accuse someone unfairly. I decided to continue with the date. However, I already knew I would not get back into his car. I planned to order an Uber home after dinner, no matter what he said. We sat down and ordered food. Normally, sushi makes me happy. That evening, I barely had an appetite. My body was still full of fear. My hands shook slightly when I lifted my chopsticks. I felt exhausted, even though the night was not over. The man seemed calmer now that we were inside the restaurant. For a few minutes, we tried to have a normal conversation. Then, without warning, he asked, "So when do you think we'll have sex?" I nearly choked on a piece of sashimi. "What?" I said. I truly did not understand where the question had come from. This was our first date. Only a short time earlier, he had watched me become pale and terrified because I believed he might be taking me into the woods to harm me. Now, while I was still visibly shaken, he was asking when I planned to sleep with him. He looked at me as though he had asked something reasonable. "You know," he said. How long will you make me wait for sex? A day? A week? A month? I stared at him. I could not answer. The way he asked made it sound as though sex was something I owed him after a certain waiting period. He was not asking whether I liked him or whether I felt comfortable. He was asking how long I intended to make him wait. The question showed that he already expected it to happen. Well, I can't wait a whole month, he said. I'm telling you now. I felt completely speechless. There are moments when the mind creates several possible responses, but none of them reach the mouth. I wanted to tell him that he was disgusting. I wanted to ask why he believed he had any right to decide when I would have sex. I wanted to remind him that this was our first meeting and that I did not even know if I wanted to see him again. But I also remembered that he knew where I lived. I did not want to make him angry while we were still sitting together. So I did not answer the question. The rest of the date became painfully awkward. Every attempt at conversation died quickly. I wanted the meal to end, but I did not want to rush so obviously that he realized how uncomfortable I was. I watched the time and planned my exit. When we finished eating, I ordered an Uber. I told him I would arrange my own ride home. I do not remember whether he argued, but I had already decided I would not enter his car again. When the Uber arrived, I said goodbye and got inside. The moment the door closed, I felt safer. Only seconds after the driver pulled out of the restaurant parking lot, my phone received a message from the Tinder man. He said he did not think things would work out between us because he needed a woman with a higher libido. I looked at the message in disbelief. We had spent one evening together. He had scared me badly by driving into an isolated wooded area. Then he had demanded to know how long he would need to wait for sex. Now he had decided my libido was too low because I had not given him the answer he wanted. I did not argue. I did not explain myself. I replied with one word. Okay, I was relieved that he wanted to end it. I wanted nothing more to do with him. As the Uber driver took me home, I watched the route carefully. We did not go through any wooded area. We traveled along normal streets. There were other cars around us. Traffic lights changed from red to green. Petrol stations, shops, houses, and street lights passed outside the window. Everything looked bright and ordinary. It was the sweetest view I could have imagined. The difference between the two routes made me question the Tinder man's explanation. Maybe his GPS had genuinely chosen a strange path. Different navigation apps sometimes give different directions. But the Uber driver managed to take me home without entering anything close to wilderness. That made me wonder whether the first route had truly been accidental. I will never know. It is possible the man was telling the truth and was simply terrible at handling the situation. It is possible the GPS had chosen an unusual road, and his nervous jokes about weapons and shovels came from knowing exactly what I feared. It is also possible he had wanted to frighten me. Maybe he wanted to see how I reacted when I felt trapped. Maybe he had planned something and changed his mind. Maybe reaching the restaurant had always been part of the plan, but he enjoyed having control over the route. I cannot prove any of those things. What I know is that I felt completely unsafe. That feeling should have been enough. I should not have continued the date after arriving at the restaurant. The fact that he did not harm me in the woods did not mean he was safe. His behavior during dinner proved that he did not respect boundaries. He treated sex like something he was entitled to receive within a certain number of days. He had no concern for how frightened I had been. His only concern seemed to be how quickly he would get what he wanted. I blocked him after that. For a while, I worried because he knew where I lived. Every car that slowed near my place made me look through the window. I wondered whether he would come back, especially if he became angry after I stopped responding. Thankfully, he never did. The entire experience became one of those memories that returns when I think about how easily one choice can change a situation. I had believed I was solving a small problem. I was anxious about driving, so I let him pick me up. That decision gave him my address, placed me inside his vehicle, and allowed him to control where we went. Had he truly wanted to hurt me, I had made it incredibly easy. Nobody at the restaurant knew when to expect me. Nobody was following my location. I could not even call for help when we lost signal. I had spoken to him online for weeks, but that offered no real protection. A person can sound kind through a screen. They can wait patiently and say all the right things until they get you alone. I was lucky. Whatever his intentions were, I returned home safely. The fear I felt in the woods became a lesson I should have learned before the date. Meeting someone from a dating app requires more than trusting your feelings. The first meeting should happen in a busy public place. You should arrange your own transport. A friend or family member should know where you are. You should keep control of how you leave. Most importantly, a stranger should not pick you up from your home. I allowed my fear of driving to become more important than my safety. That was a mistake I never repeated. Looking back, the strangest part is how many times I ignored my instincts. I felt uncomfortable when the road became isolated. I felt worse when there was no signal. I became terrified when he mentioned a shovel and weapons. Then, after reaching the restaurant, I convinced myself to stay because nothing had happened yet. My mind kept searching for reasons to be polite. Women are often taught to avoid making others uncomfortable, even when we are frightened ourselves. I did not want to accuse him unfairly. I did not want to embarrass him. I did not want to seem dramatic. Meanwhile, he had no problem asking when I would have sex with him. He did not care whether that question made me uncomfortable. That difference has stayed with me. I was worried about his feelings while questioning whether I was in danger. He was worried about how long he would have to wait to get sex. I know now that I did not owe him the rest of the date. I could have left as soon as we reached the restaurant. I could have spoken to an employee and asked to wait somewhere safe for my Uber. I could have called a friend. I could have refused to sit down with him. Politeness was not more important than my instincts. The date ended without violence, but I still consider it one of the most frightening experiences of my life. There was no attack. There was no weapon. Nothing happened in the woods. That does not erase the fear of being isolated in a stranger's car, unable to contact anyone, while he repeatedly insisted he was not taking me there on purpose. Sometimes danger is obvious. Sometimes it is only the knowledge that you have placed yourself entirely under another person's control. For what felt like an eternity, I did not know whether I was on the way to a restaurant or to the place where someone intended to kill me. I was fortunate enough to find out that night. I made it to the restaurant. I took an Uber home. I never saw him again. The lesson was simple, and I should already have known it. Do not let a stranger from a dating app pick you up in their car. No matter how long you have been talking, no matter how normal they seem, no matter how much you dislike driving, meet them somewhere public. Control your own way home. And when your instincts tell you something is wrong, do not stay just because you are afraid of seeming rude. When I was younger, somewhere between 4 and 11 years old, my brother and I spent almost every summer with our cousins. They lived far out in the countryside, along a long dead-end road where there was very little traffic and almost nothing for children to do except make their own fun. There were fields on both sides of the road, thick bushes, scattered trees, and a few houses separated by long stretches of land. During the day, it felt peaceful. We could ride our bikes without worrying about cars, spend hours outside, and disappear into the fields without anyone becoming too concerned. At night, the area felt completely different. There were very few streetlights, so once the sun went down, most of the road disappeared into darkness. The trees became black shapes, and every noise carried much farther than it did during the day. You could hear dogs barking from houses you could not see, and animals moving in the grass beside the road. Still, we loved spending our summers there. My older brother and our two cousins were the people I spent almost all my time with. We rode bikes, played games, explored the fields, and went looking for anything that seemed interesting. The most interesting place was located all the way at the end of the road. There was a summer home, an abandoned horse stable, and an abandoned house. The buildings looked as though nobody had properly used them in at least 60 years. The wood was old and dark, the paint had almost completely disappeared, and plants had grown around parts of the property. We never knew who owned the land. There were cars parked outside, but they never moved. They always seemed to be sitting in exactly the same places, slowly being covered by dirt, leaves, and weather damage. Nobody arrived to use the summer home. Nobody opened the doors or windows. We never saw anyone cutting the grass, checking the property, or repairing anything. The entire area was always deathly quiet. That silence should probably have frightened us more than it did. Most abandoned places still have some kind of life around them. Birds land on the roof, small animals move through the grass, wind pushes against loose pieces of wood. This place seemed to absorb sound. When we reached the end of the road and approached the buildings, even our voices seemed quieter. There were no neighbors close enough to hear us, and the road behind us looked much longer once we were standing there. We usually went as a group. There would be me, my older brother, and our two cousins. Sometimes other children came with us, but most of the time it was just the four of us. Because I was never alone, I did not feel too frightened. My brother was older, and I trusted him. My cousins knew the area better than we did, so I assumed they would know if the property was truly dangerous. The abandoned horse stable was the easiest building to explore. It was almost completely open. Parts of the doors were missing, and there were wide spaces where we could walk in without forcing anything. Inside, there were old stalls, broken pieces of wood, rusty metal, and thick layers of dust. Sometimes we found old tools or pieces of equipment that had been left behind. The stable smelled like damp wood and old hay, even though no horses had been there for years. We used it as part of our games. We played hide and seek between the stalls or chased each other through the building. Sometimes we pretended it was a base, a prison, or a haunted place we had to escape from. The stable was creepy, but it never felt completely closed in. Sunlight came through the broken walls and open doors. If anything frightened us, we could easily run outside. The abandoned house was different. Its windows had been boarded up, and most of the doors were difficult to reach or impossible to open. The building looked much more complete than the stable, which made us even more curious. We wanted to know what was inside. We tried looking through cracks between the boards, but we could never see much. Sometimes we thought we saw furniture or shapes in the darkness, but we could not be certain. We talked about the house constantly. One of us would say there were probably old toys inside. Another would say someone had died there. We imagined hidden rooms, money, weapons, bones, or secret tunnels. None of us knew the real history of the property, so we created our own stories. Most of the time, we stayed outside. We played tag in the garden, rode our bikes around the property, or dared each other to touch the walls and windows. Then one day, we decided we were actually going to enter the house. There was a single door on the ground floor that looked more possible to open than the others. It was closed, but it did not appear to be locked. We pulled on it, but it barely moved. The wood had swollen and become stuck after years of weather and neglect. Dirt and plants had grown around the bottom, and the hinges made a rough sound whenever we tried to force it. Instead of giving up, we found a strong stick. We pushed the stick into the small gap between the door and the frame and used it as a lever. The door moved a little. We pushed harder. There was a cracking sound as old dirt and paint broke away from the edge. The door slowly opened far enough for us to look inside. I remember feeling excited more than afraid. We had spent so much time wondering what was inside that finally opening the door felt like discovering a secret. The room behind it was small. It was not the main part of the house. It may have been a storage room, side entrance, or utility space. There was almost no light inside because the windows were boarded, but enough daylight came through the open door for us to see the floor. It was covered in old medicine bottles. There were dozens of them. Some were made of dark glass, while others were plastic. Most were covered in dust, and their labels had faded or become too dirty to read. Many of the bottles were open. Pills had been removed and thrown around the room. They were scattered across the floor as if someone had emptied handfuls of them and walked away. Some pills were still close to the bottles. Others had rolled into corners or underneath old pieces of rubbish. None of us touched them. Even as children, we understood that old medicine could be dangerous. We did not know what the pills were or how long they had been there. The room felt wrong. It did not look like someone had simply stored unused medicine there. It looked chaotic. I remember wondering why anyone would throw pills across the floor. Had someone been searching for a certain bottle? Had they dropped them while trying to leave? The room did not give us any answers. We backed away from the doorway and let the door rest partly open. That should probably have been enough exploring for one day. Instead, we decided to try another entrance. Behind the house, the land rose into a small hill. Because the building had been built against the slope, there was another door at the back that led directly into the second floor. We climbed the hill until we reached it. This door also looked old, but it opened more easily than the one below. When we pushed it, a dark room appeared beyond it. Only 2 of us were brave enough to go inside. My older brother and my other cousin stayed near the entrance. I went in with one of my cousins. The air inside was stale and dusty. It had the smell of old fabric, wood, and a place that had remained closed for years. The room looked as though someone had been preparing to pack up and leave, but had suddenly stopped. There were boxes, bags, clothes, and random objects lying around. Some things had been placed carefully, while others had been thrown onto the floor. It looked as though the people living there had planned to move out about 20 years earlier and never finished. Nothing looked new. Dust covered almost everything. The furniture and boxes had not been moved in a long time. There were no clean footprints, fresh food, or signs that anyone had recently entered. That made me feel slightly safer. At least, I believed nobody was living there. We did not walk far from the doorway. The room was dark, and we could not see what was deeper inside the house. There were other doorways and what looked like a hall leading farther into the second floor. We had no flashlights, and none of us wanted to become separated. Near the entrance, my cousin found a small Lego build on the floor. I do not remember exactly what it was supposed to be. It may have been a tiny car, house, or random collection of blocks. It had clearly been sitting there for years. My cousin was always energetic and excited back then. He liked making noise and doing things without thinking too much about the result. The moment he saw the Lego build, he decided to kick it. He took a step back and drop-kicked it across the floor. The Lego model shattered. Small plastic pieces flew in every direction and struck the walls, boxes, and floor. The noise seemed extremely loud inside the empty house. I immediately became uncomfortable. Even though the place was abandoned, it still felt wrong to break something that had belonged to whoever once lived there. I turned around and walked outside. My cousin followed close behind me. The other 2 were waiting near the doorway. I stepped away from the house and faced the open countryside. For a moment, None of us said anything. Then I heard another shattering sound from inside. It sounded similar to the Lego build breaking. Something struck the floor or wall, and several small objects scattered. I did not turn around. I assumed my cousin had gone back inside and kicked something else. "Stop breaking things," I shouted, using his name. Everyone became silent. My brother spoke from behind me. He's right here." I turned around. My cousin was standing beside the others. Nobody was inside the house. All four of us were outside. The doorway behind them was open, but the room beyond it was dark and empty. For a few seconds, my mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I looked from my cousin to the doorway, and then back again. Maybe the first Lego piece had continued moving and knocked something over. Maybe part of the model had landed on a shelf and caused another object to fall a few seconds later. That was possible, but the second sound had not seemed small. It had sounded like something had been thrown or broken inside the room after we had all left. None of us laughed. We stood there staring at the doorway. It felt like we remained in that position for 10 minutes, though it was probably much less. Nobody wanted to go back inside and investigate. We listened. At first, there was only silence. The open doorway looked darker than it had before. I could no longer clearly see the boxes or objects near the entrance. My eyes kept searching for movement. I expected a person to step into view. I wondered whether someone had been hiding deeper inside the house the entire time. Maybe they had watched us enter. Maybe the building was not as abandoned as we believed. The cars outside never moved, but that did not prove nobody was living there. Someone could have been using the house without leaving often. Maybe they had been sleeping downstairs or hiding behind one of the closed doors. The thought terrified me. If a person was inside, we had broken into their home and destroyed something that belonged to them. They might be angry. Then we heard movement from the ground floor. It began as a light scurrying sound. For a moment, it sounded like a small animal running across the floor. That would have made sense. Rats, raccoons, or other animals could easily live inside an abandoned house. The second breaking sound might have been caused by one of them moving through the room. I almost felt relieved. Then the noise changed. The light scurrying became heavier. We heard what sounded like footsteps. They were coming from somewhere below us. The steps moved quickly across the ground floor. They were too heavy to be made by a small animal. The sound grew louder as it approached what must have been the staircase. Then the footsteps began climbing. They were not slow. Whatever was moving inside was sprinting up the stairs. Each step struck the old wood hard enough for us to hear it clearly through the open doorway. Nobody said anything. There was no discussion about whether we should stay or run. All four of us reacted at the same time. We turned and ran down the hill. I do not remember feeling the usual rush of excitement or adrenaline. I only felt complete terror. My body moved as fast as it could, but I felt strangely disconnected from it. I could hear my feet striking the ground, my breathing, and the others running beside me, but everything seemed distant. I expected the door behind us to slam open. I expected someone to run down the hill after us. I did not look back. Looking back felt like the worst thing I could do. If I saw something following us, I knew I would lose control completely. We reached our bikes, grabbed them, and climbed on as quickly as possible. One of us nearly dropped a bike while trying to turn it around. We started riding down the dead-end road toward our cousin's house. Nobody stopped. Nobody slowed down to wait for anyone else. We rode as fast as our legs could move. The road that had always felt peaceful now seemed dangerously long. The abandoned property remained behind us, hidden by the bend and the trees, but I could still imagine something coming after us. Every time I heard the sound of tires on the road or branches moving beside me, I thought it was following. I kept expecting a person to appear behind us, running much faster than anyone should be able to run. Nothing did. We eventually reached the house and stopped near the yard. For a while, none of us could speak properly. We were breathing too hard, and all four of us looked terrified. Once we calmed down enough to talk, we repeated what had happened. We all agreed about the second breaking noise. We all remembered being outside when it happened. We all heard the movement from the ground floor. We all heard the heavy footsteps running up the stairs. There was no disagreement about those details. That was important to me because I knew I had not imagined it. If I had been alone, I might have convinced myself that fear had changed what I heard, but my brother and both cousins heard it too. We tried to think of explanations. The second breaking sound could have been caused by the Lego pieces continuing to fall. The scurrying could have been a rat. The heavy footsteps might have been a large animal moving through the house. Maybe a raccoon or another animal had been frightened when we entered. Old buildings also make strange sounds. Wood can crack, objects can fall, and noises can travel in ways that make them seem closer than they are. Those explanations were possible, but the sound of something running up the stairs did not feel like the house settling. The steps had a clear rhythm. They moved from the lower floor to the staircase and came toward us. The sound became louder with every step. Whatever caused it seemed to know where we were. We did not return to the property for a long time. Before that day, the abandoned buildings had felt like part of our summer. They were creepy, but they were also exciting. We believed they belonged to us in a strange way because nobody else ever went there. Afterward, the place felt occupied. I no longer saw the boarded windows as empty. I imagined someone looking through the gaps from inside. I thought about the pill bottles scattered across the ground floor room. Maybe they had belonged to someone who had been sick. Maybe the house had been abandoned after something happened there. I thought about the half-packed belongings on the second floor. Why had the people left so suddenly? Why had they never returned for their clothes, boxes, and the small Lego model? Maybe there was a normal explanation. The owner could have died. The family may have argued over the property. The house could have become unsafe, leaving the belongings trapped inside. But as a child, my mind created darker stories. I wondered whether the family had started packing because they were afraid of something in the house. Maybe they planned to leave and never got the chance. Maybe the pills belonged to someone who had lost control. Maybe the cars outside belonged to people who entered the property and never came back out. I knew those thoughts were probably not true, but the house gave us no real answers. The property remained quiet. The cars still never moved. The doors and windows still looked untouched. Sometimes, while riding past the end of the road from a distance, I looked toward the buildings and wondered whether the second floor door was still open. I wondered whether something had stood in the doorway after we ran. None of us had looked back, so we would never know. As I became older, I tried to think about the experience more logically. The house had been empty for decades, so animals almost certainly lived inside it. A large raccoon, fox, or other animal could make surprisingly heavy sounds on wooden floors. If it had been sleeping downstairs when we entered, the sound of the Lego breaking might have frightened it. It could have run through the house and up the stairs looking for an escape. The second shattering noise might have been caused by the animal knocking something over. That explanation fits many of the details, but it does not completely remove the fear. If it was an animal, it was still moving directly toward the door where we were standing. If it had reached the second floor before we ran, it might have attacked us out of fear. Another possibility is that a person was hiding inside. The property may have been used by someone without the owner's knowledge. A homeless person, local teenager, or criminal could have stayed in the house. They may have remained silent while we entered because they did not want to be discovered. Then, after my cousin broke the Lego build, they may have become angry. and charged up the stairs. That explanation frightens me more than any ghost story. A real person could have caught us. We were children in an isolated area at the end of a road. Nobody knew exactly where we were, and nobody would have heard us shouting from inside the abandoned house. We were lucky that we stayed close to the entrance. We were lucky that we left before the footsteps reached the second floor. I still remember the moment my brother said my cousin was standing beside him. Before that, the second crash was only annoying. After those words, the entire situation changed. There was no longer a simple reason for the sound. Then came the footsteps. That sequence has stayed clear in my mind for years. The first Lego model breaking, turning my back on the house. The second shattering sound, me shouting at my cousin. The silence, my brother telling me my cousin was outside. Then the scurrying from below, the sound becoming heavier, the footsteps racing up the stairs, and all four of us running without saying a word. I have been frightened many times since then, but few experiences have created the same kind of fear. There was no time to think. My body understood the danger before my mind did. We had entered a place that did not belong to us. We had disturbed something. Then it came toward us. Maybe it was only an animal. Maybe it was a person. Maybe old objects had fallen at exactly the wrong time and made us believe the house was alive. I do not know. What I do know is that we never looked at the abandoned property the same way again. Before that day, it was a playground. Afterward, it was a place where something had heard us enter, waited until we were outside, and then ran up the stairs after us. I still sometimes wonder what would have appeared in the doorway if we had stayed for only a few more seconds. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nockmeyer Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night, and if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.